All right. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. We're going to jump right into our next session. This is a fireside chat. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Deborah Saucier, President and Vice Chancellor of Vancouver Island University, to join us on stage for a 20-minute fireside chat.
That's a giant drink, Dallas.
It is. So, since I ran 2 minutes late, I'll abruptly start this one. And Dr. Saucier is just commenting on my refreshing beverage I have with me. A few years ago, that would have been a clear indication of a hangover, but now it's just I had to get up early with my kids to get them to school before I got here, and I needed a sugar rush. And I still can't drink coffee. That's why I never made it as a commercial fisherman. So you'll have to excuse my 12-year-old nature here right now.
Oh, no worries.
I do have a reusable straw, though, for those of you who are environmentally conscious. So there's another checklist. So, Dr. Deb, is it okay if I call you that?
Absolutely.
We're friends now?
Yeah, Deb is fine.
You know, I'm really pleased to have you here today because education's really the background of all of this. For years, our people were told to go to school and they faced other problems and challenges, and a lot of our people who made it through the school system either went different ways and never came back, or I think of, just before my generation-ish, if you went to school, you should have been a doctor or a lawyer, or why were you going to university? And that's changed so much. I think the partnerships of institutions like yours and others that have sort of led the way to make education more inclusive to the First Peoples of this land. So why don't you give us a few just opening comments, introduce yourself a bit, and we'll have a little chat.
All right. Asiam nasiya, asiam snanemok mostimuk, asiam Nanwakolas mostimuk, asiam huamak mostimuk, asiam shasiam mostimuk, anthapat sapiko behesku isku, anthamana ath Henri Saucier and Marilyn Taranich, Tenitsan ath Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm, for those of you who don't know me, I'm the President and Vice Chancellor of Vancouver Island University, and I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. So I'm very grateful in English for the use of the lands of Snuneymuxw today to conduct our business. And I'm really grateful for all of you being here, potentially interested in what I have to say. Dallas and I could probably go on for a couple hours about ways in which we are thinking about changing the nature of education, but one of the things I would say at a resource conference is that the greatest resource our peoples have is our talent. And that's the nature of what we do at universities and colleges across this country. We can do it better. I was asked the other day what I find to be an actual challenging question to answer, and that is how well are you doing at meeting the calls of the TRC? And I said, well, since we're talking about check boxes, we've checked them off, but that's a surface level. Universities, I would say, are remarkably good at conveying Western knowledge, right? Biology, chemistry, political science. They're not well equipped by their nature to understand the kinds of things that Dallas and I are working on, and that we've been working on with Nanwakolas all this time, trying to figure out ways in which we can honor the knowledges of First Peoples, peoples who have been taking care of this land for 40, 45. The numbers change every week as they find more evidence that the peoples have been here forever, right? But they know how to take care of the lands, and sure, I can help with some of this, but part of what I'm really proud of is the work that we're doing with peoples like yourself to really give voice to Indigenous knowledges and to try and integrate that with Western knowledges on an equal footing. Not on a different footing, because I don't know about you, but when people said I was different in school, that wasn't really a compliment. That was like, oh, you don't really fit in, that's different. And that's not what I want for Indigenous knowledges at VIU, and I think that's not what's meant by DRIPA or the TRC either. It's that we actually integrate this and ensure that the value is understood by folks. So there's my opening salvo.
I think that's a great start. I'm glad you referenced the TRC because I know Dr. Ralph Nilsson was instrumental in helping with part of that process and taking it to the academic community and I think it's the Association of Universities or whatever the federal organization's called. But, you know, we've sort of learned that if you try to set out to solve things in the TRC, it's very challenging. But if you build the kind of relationships that just continue to reinvest in your community, you realize that you start to achieve some of those goals at a more meaningful level. But let's start on sort of our bread and butter, the Stewardship Training Technician Program.
Yeah.
You and I got to sit in Victoria and watch all the work that our people did to bring us together to announce a long-term deal on the training of guardians and stewardship technicians. And they're so important in our communities because they fulfill the roles that watchmen used to play. They watch what's going on in our territories. They're the boots on the ground. Whether we're protecting something or developing something, these stewardship technicians are so important. And, you know, the partnership that we built with VIU is world-class and cutting edge to the point where, you know, you come to us and bring the teachers and the professionals, and they work with our staff to make sure that we put our kids in the most, or we put our people, our students, in the most opportune place to be successful. So talk about VIU and how you guys have learned to work with different communities at the level they need to be worked with at.
Yeah, great question. You know, I would reference a situation I had when I was in Alberta, where I was working with a colleague at the University of Alberta on just a particular little problem that some of you might understand. And that was they'd hired someone to develop a course in Cree language. And then, because universities are like this, the university believed they owned it. And I gave some very, you know, simple advice, like try to make it right, go talk to the elders, please talk to the hereditary chiefs and things like that. Very simple advice, not anything profound. But I really learned something from that that's relevant to what you just asked me. And that is that you can't own a language. And universities are used to saying, well, I paid you to develop this course, so now it's mine. It's my intellectual property. And so the biggest difference in our approach, and this is a long-standing approach we have here at VIU, is to understand that the intellectual property that we're working on with the nations is not ours, right? That is the cultural heritage and the property of the nations. And that's a fundamental, it seems like an easy shift, right? Everybody here is nodding, going, well, that's obvious, Deb. Like, wow, thanks for the brainwave. But again, it's that idea, that Western idea that you can buy something and it's yours, right? I am not from here. I was born in Saskatchewan, as you heard, and I'm a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta, partly because of where my family comes from. But my teachings and my elders taught me that I don't really own my house. I have this house for 6 generations in the future. I'm trying to build something better for the 7th generation. And so that approach is what we've been taking with the guardians and stewardship pieces, or with our work with other nations that we work with very carefully to say, what is it that you need? Because it's been too long, I think, universities going in and saying, I know what you need. You need a forestry program, or you need a this, or you need a that, and we'll tell you how to do it, because we know. And so taking the basic teachings of humbleness and generosity, and actually listening to folks, just what we heard on the other panel this morning about listening and really collaborating, cooperating, is actually the heart of what we're doing with the stewardship programs. You know, we put the technology in place, we work hard to ensure that the needs of the communities are being met, and then we get really excited young people who really want to help their nation. And I don't know about you, Dallas, but you mentioned this. When I went to university, my family and everyone were like, well, you should be a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer because that's what we need. And I'm a neuroscientist, which you can imagine raised a few eyebrows because, you know, my sister, who always fails to recognize my brilliance, routinely refers to me as the rat brain surgeon, right? She's like, well, that's what our nation needed so badly, is a rat brain surgeon. Yeah, Deb, go. But I was given that freedom to explore what I needed, and our young people need to be on the land. They want to be involved in culture. They want to protect and steward the gifts that they've received for the next 7 generations. And so that's the heart of what we're doing. I could talk about the technical bits, but the technical bits are only interesting to folks like me and Dallas. But again, it's that real spirit of understanding that folks know what they need.
Well, you know, I'm glad you brought up the rat brain, because if you follow some of my happy people on social media, they compare my brain to the size of a rat sometimes, so we should take that for a second dialogue. But
okay.
You know, I think one of the other things that's been interesting, I see Chief Chris Roberts, who, you know, I think I got it right this time. Chris worked for me for a long time as my economic development officer, and he developed a document called the Career Pathways Study, where we saw what was changing in our communities. We saw the forest industry was aging out. We saw that different components of different industries that existed in our communities were phasing out. And so Chris put together a team of 80 different stakeholders and started talking about what training needs do we need going forward for jobs that exist in our territories. When the fishing industry fell apart, we saw so many of our people leave to go to the oil patch and go to other places. And while that's great to find that good, steady employment, it was bringing social issues back to our communities because the lack of a parent in the community and other challenges. But, you know, what's VIU's commitment to continue? I think of the Deep Bay Shellfish Research Station. Mm-hmm. You know, how is VIU going to continue to help us prepare people for jobs that exist in this region?
Good and hard question. One of the things that I look at very, very carefully, because I steward resources given to me by the province and given to me by our students to actually ensure that I am doing the things they need. And we spend a lot of time looking at where the economy is going. And let me tell you, the only reason I probably wound up in this chair was I graduated in 1986 from UVic when it was about 30% unemployment and the forestry sector was decimated. And then I got my next degree in 1988. And then I went and said, well, there's still no jobs, so I guess I'll continue on. And so I did that. But I had the ability to do that. Many of our people did not. And so it's really critically important to me that we align with the visions of the nations, with the visions of what it is that they want and need, right? And so we're doing things like exploring, here's an example, exploring teacher education in community, in northern and remote communities, because we know we need good teachers. And we also know that if you send your teachers down here to Nanaimo, or the kids who want to do that, students who want to do that, the Nanaimo School District or the Victoria School District or whomever will pay better, and they'll scoop them up, right? And then those students and the leaders in your communities are gone. So we're trying to be really innovative about how to ensure that we're not stripping the talent out of community, keeping it in community, and finding the things that will actually ensure long-term prosperity. You know, in translated from Cree roughly and poorly, I apologize because I don't speak Cree or Michif, the language of my people, is that we talk about having a good life. Mm-hmm. And even my Canadian students, you know, they yearn for the land. You see them get out on the land with some elders, and they yearn for it. So how much more do our students yearn for the land? How much more do they yearn to contribute and be leaders in their communities? And so that's key to my goal in working with the nations, is how not to strip your talent out and then send it to work for the province in Victoria or Vancouver or the oil patch or wherever. How do I ensure vibrancy in communities who desperately need their youth to stay? Right? That's the key question and driver when I do work with folks like you to develop agreements, long-term agreements that we're not walking away from, right? This is key to everything I'm trying to accomplish here.
You know, I love these things, but I hate the fact that once we get really rolling, time always becomes a factor. But that's the great things about building partnerships and collaborative arrangements, is the discussion doesn't stop. So on behalf of BC IROC, I'd like to thank you for sharing some insight today, and I so look forward to continuing to work with Vancouver Island University to help develop curriculum, to help talk about housing issues that you and I have talked about in the past. But I know Logan's going to freak out. I'm going to give you 10 seconds to talk about housing and just some of the work we need to do around that.
Yeah, housing, absolutely critical. I can tell you that there is not a nation that I have visited that has enough housing. And yet we are sitting there trying to figure out how we're going to get enough carpenters, electricians, plumbers, community master planners out there to meet this need. And we've been talking about innovative ways that we can start to think about housing and actually start to do this. We work with the Malahat Nation, for instance, that you know, to build houses on Nation as part of a project for our trades students. But it's bigger than trades, right? People focus on the trades, but it's bigger than trades because it's also the management of that, the vision, right, around what that community will look like, not just sort of, okay, we got $1 million, let's throw up these many things here. We've got to make sure that there's schools. All of these pieces are absolutely critical to long-term success. And I remain committed and happy if you want to reach out to me, to just reach out to me. I'm really easy to find at VIU, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you or your nations or your corporations. One last quick thing, and I know, I will put a pitch in. I have something called the Indigenous Interns Leadership Program that we run all across British Columbia, and we take your graduates and we get them 2-year paid internships so that they can build their networks, build their leadership skills. And so if you have a need for an intern or you know of a graduate, please contact me. I have a dedicated person who just spends time trying to match people and do the kinds of things that we know our people don't do as well sometimes, right? I know I do this. If I had run into a roadblock when I was younger, I would just say, okay, I'm just going to quit, right? So there's coaching, mentoring, not just how to write a resume or do an interview. It's a full wraparound to try and keep the leaders that we have in the community and build their networks. So again, just a shameless pitch, but if you have graduates or you have positions, let me know. Thank you.
Collaboration and shameless pitches, that's what BC IROC does. Deborah Saucier.
All right, well, they take their photo there. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around for this first session. We're going to take a short networking break and bring you all back here at 10:55 a.m. for our next panel, which is Watershed Restoration and the Restoration Economy. We look forward to seeing you all in just a few minutes. Thank you.